Good afternoon. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It's Wednesday, April 1st, 2026. It's just after 2 p.m. and we have been referred the capital bill. It's in our possession now. We heard a bit of it last week that was put into the budget. And now age 952 on its own, and we'll hear the rest of it and the vote and let it move on its way. So we have lots of people, everybody we need. So whoever wants to go first, John, maybe from Lunch Council, do you want to start?
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel. I don't know if others want to.
Scott Moore, Joint Fiscal Office.
Representative Alice Emmons, Chair, House Corrections and Institutions.
I think you have a couple of your committee members here also as needed.
There will be more coming in.
Okay, well, everybody's welcome.
So I'm going to screen share with you. As the chair noted, you already got a preview of this, including, I think, the primary section that you guys focus on when it passes through. But now you have the full of the bill. Just for orientation purposes, as you know, the capital bill, like the budget, includes a budget adjustment act. That's what you see this year, because the capital budget is passed as a biennial act, right? It covers both last year and this year. And so the form of the bill that you have this year is the Adjustment Act, which means that each of the sections are amendments to last year's passed capital bill. The structure for the bill as a whole, in the past, many years ago, the capital bill was exclusively funded through general obligation bonding. But as you know, we now have the cash fund that we talked about last week. And so the first portions of the bill, sections 2 through 16, deal with the bond authorized projects. And then we have cash sections as well, which we talked about last week. If you tallied up the total bonding authority that is set out in the act, which we will come to that section, and in alignment with the CDAC recommendations, you would get a figure that is lower than the total authorizations. And as you know, that's because there's multiple funding sources. So one is the general obligation bonding, one is cash, but another is reallocations. So taking former appropriations and then using them to defray expenditures of this act. I'm not going to speak too much about the individual line items, but if happy to flip through. So section 2 is your classic BGS section, setting out changes from last year's capital bill to the line items there. Let me know if I should stop on any particular thing, but I'm just gonna roll.
The best thing, I can go through this.
Going to be the big.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can go through the spreadsheet.
So maybe, John, if there's some policy things that wouldn't be in the spreadsheet, that's probably what we should have you focus on.
Then I will, if you don't mind me scrolling quickly.
Right ahead. We'll just shut our eyes until you get to where you want to go.
I can also pause it, but I kind of want to flip through already. So here we go. Reallocations. This is one of the funding sources I was citing before. We next come to your cash sections in just a second. Yes, so your cash fund and project authorizations, these should be familiar to you from last week. These are what were set out in that floor amendment on third reading passed. So the policy sessions start just after this piece. They begin on page 14. And the first two sections come from the Department of Environmental Conservation. These are related to private loans for private water systems. These are offered by the Vermont Economic Development Authority. And this is an update to expand existing language to provide advantage loan terms to these, what you see here called eligible mobile home park water systems. And you can see the defined term here, but this is a privately owned nonprofit community type system that serves a majority of the users who reside in certain kinds of mobile home parks, those that are nonprofit owned or those that are resident owned and that are registered with the Department of Housing and Community Development. So this is a particular kind of water system. And under existing law, the non-underlined language, you're seeing existing law, Vermont Economic Development Authority can extend loans for the purposes of, this is the revolving water loan fund. So this, yep. So this is to provide compliance with state and federal regulations, essentially. And so these loans, you can see the conditions here on page 15. In existing law, typically the loans are not to exceed 30 years. That's what you see in sub 1. They're to be secured by assets determined by VEDA, the Vermont Economic Development Authority. Under 3, you have to establish a dedicated source of revenue. And then under 4, the treasurer sets the rate of interest for these loans. And what you see at the end of this sub 4, which again, other than the stylistic change that you note there is not amended by this language. Under this section, the interest rate set may be less than the prevailing borrowing rates available to similarly situated applicants from private lenders, but not less than 0%. So it floors the loan that can be extended. The reason I call out this term limitation, the 30 years, and the minimum interest rate is because sub 5, which is the piece that is being touched here on page 16, provides an exception to those rules. So at the top of page 16, and this is where the new language is going in, notwithstanding subs 1 and 4, a privately owned nonprofit community type system may qualify for a 40-year loan term at an interest rate plus administrative fee to be established by the Secretary of Natural Resources rather than the Treasurer, that shall be not more than 3% or less than -3%. So longer term length and lower interest rates available. Currently, what you see in the proviso here is that this is available to applicant systems that meet certain income levels and annual household user cost requirements. The change that is being included in the capital bill is to expand these loan terms to the eligible mobile home park water system. So again, this is an existing authority for VITA to do this, leveraging the Secretary of Natural Resources. It's just expanding that eligibility to allow eligible mobile home park water systems. The other piece that's tied to this is that under subdivision C, the Secretary certifies the loan term and interest rate to VITA. And I'm going to read this without the new language just to set up what the problem is. In no instance shall the annual interest rate plus administrative fee be less than is necessary to achieve an annual household user cost equal to 1% of the median household income. So while there is a minimum interest rate set in sub A, this provides kind of an additional condition that it needs to be no less than is necessary to achieve an annual household user cost equal to 1%. So another practical floor is set through that. And the carve out that you see here is that that condition is going to apply to all the loans that we're going through this program, except those that apply to the eligible mobile home park water system. So the simple way to describe these changes is you've now extended the most advantaged loan terms to these eligible mobile home park water systems. I don't know the incentive effects, but that is what the law is.
Okay, any questions?
What's the point of the -3%?
I can
I'm
tell you.
happy to jump in. So we had this question of Ways and Means this morning, and I reached out to the Secretary of Natural Resources and asked the question, what does this mean? How does this work? And essentially the -3% is a way for loan forgiveness to be in there. And they said, quite frankly, the -3% is kind of a vexing and generally unfamiliar term. And their current usage is to actually say like a 25% loan forgiveness versus up to -3% loan forgiveness. So my understanding is it's old timey language to use the -3%.
I can explain.
The idea behind it is it's loan forgiveness for.
I understand. Thanks.
When we initially put this law in place, which was probably, I would say it's in the late 90s, is really to help the disadvantaged communities, your lower income communities, your water districts and your fire districts as well, to access the drinking water revolving loan fund. And it was based on the income, median income of either that fire district or that municipality or even the mobile home park. And if they were below a certain income, we really wanted to help the ratepayers. And when you did a +3 interest down to a -3, the -3 interest rate was equivalent to a 40% grant. And that's what we had for regular municipalities in our drinking water revolving loan fund, as well as our clean water revolving loan fund. We also had the capacity for them to achieve a 40% grant. And we wanted to do the same thing with these fire districts and water districts and nonprofit mobile home parks. So that's the history of the initial spread on the interest rates.
On page 17, this section 12 is authorizing the State Historic Preservation Officer to solicit grants in addition to accepting them. As I understand it, there are a few other state agencies that also have this similar solicitation ability. As you know, generally folks do not have the authority to solicit. Section 13, Little River State Park lease. This is granting in FY 27 the Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation authority to enter into a long-term lease with the Vermont Huts Association for use of a structure at the Little River State Park. And then it sets out specific lease term conditions, renewal for additional 10-year terms after a 20-year term, setting the fee or fee formula, conditions on use, insurance, provisions for termination, sort of standard contractual terms you would want it addressed in advance of executing. Page 19, this is in previous capital bills, there had been extended authority for the Commissioner of BGS to transfer to the town of Springfield portions of the Southern State Correctional Facility. This new section is replacing earlier extended authorities, which were for different purposes. This is to transfer to the town of Springfield property consisting of approximately 23 acres to be used for municipal purposes, including economic development as an industrial parcel. And again, you have a set of contingencies that have to be met for that to happen, including obtaining state or local zoning or subdivision approvals, negotiating updates to an ongoing agreement to establish responsibility for how are you going to deal with access roads, water, sewer service lines, how are you going to mitigate impacts to the Springfield community, and ensuring that the transferred property doesn't include any brownfields as part of that transfer. In addition to the transfer authority itself, there's kind of a check-in. The town has not begun developing that transferred property for purposes of economic development. By the end of March 2030, the town would consult with BGS to examine alternative uses. We have a set of repeals tied to this. The first, subsection A, this is repealing the previous extension of transfer authority. It's basically being supplanted by this one. And then sub B is saying you have until July 1, 2030 to transfer the property. If it hasn't been transferred from the state to the town of Springfield by that point, the authority would lapse. And essentially, if you wanted to do this, you would need a new extension of authority. Lastly, section 16. This is language you'll be familiar with. This is already included in the budget. This is the check-in on the Green Mountain Youth Campus, ensuring that you receive regular reports during adjournment, trying to get that annual operating budget, and then prohibiting any expenditures by DCF or BGS in FY 27 until either you receive joint fiscal approval during the off session in consultation with the chairs of the institutions committees, or if the session has returned, the General Assembly could authorize resumption of spending. So same as what's in the budget.
It is, okay,
It's the exact same.
great.
I'm going to call back to one of the cash pieces. The final cash authorization had been, or maybe the penultimate cash authorization had been $3 million for Wi-Fi installation at state correctional facilities. Part of those efforts, this has been an ongoing project. The Commissioner of Corrections and the Chief Information Officer of Digital Services need to report during the tournament on that progress of installation. The effective date is on passage.
Chairman, did you chat with ADS about this as well? They came in to testify.
Tried to have them come in and testify, and they said that they weren't prepared to come in to testify and that doing anything would be premature at this point. Last year, our committee as well as House Energy Committee sent ADS.
Yeah.
In conversations with ADS as well as DOC, we sent a letter to the broadband board recommending that the broadband board provide money to ADS and DOC to do this. That was denied. There was no money appropriated. So our committee feels quite strongly that our correctional facilities need access to Wi-Fi. We did do the hotspots. As I stated when I was here before, we did that with COVID money. So we've done that preliminary work in our facilities. But this is really impacting the operations of DOC by not having Wi-Fi. It's impacting security staff and it's impacting folks who are sentenced and living in our facilities, limiting access, particularly to Community High School of Vermont. Community High School of Vermont right now is offering a lot of classes, but because there isn't a Wi-Fi capability, the instructors physically have to go to the facility to do that.
So is this pushback of some sort, or is there a lack of money or resources? What do you feel?
Pushback from us or pushback from ADS?
ADS and
I can't answer for them. I just know we attempted to have them come into the committee to testify. And they said that putting any money in was way ahead of any planning they have done. But it was our understanding last year that there had been some planning done and work with DOC. So the committee really strongly feels we need to get this going.
Yeah, I just had one question. We heard a lot about the cost of transporting folks to court hearings, et cetera. And I'm just wondering if it's envisioned that this Wi-Fi capacity would enable folks to to go to court essentially through Wi-Fi.
Well, right now, we do have remote arraignments and they do occur. It's on their own little network. We already do remote arraignments for folks who are incarcerated. So to cut down on the amount of transport costs and pressure on our sheriffs. So we already do have that capacity, but it's in a certain network. But in order to have broader internet access and broader Wi-Fi, they just don't have that capacity. So we have video arraignments right now, but that's through their own network.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, it's kind of tangential, but it's thinking of this in terms of access to the outside world, essentially with Wi-Fi and being able to do things that you should be able to do. What is the current population of folks who have served their terms but can't get out into the public for because of lack of housing or lack of other things? And where are they in the system and how do they operate within those buildings if they can't be released, if they've already served their term? Are they still considered prisoners?
They haven't served their term. I want to be real clear. When a person has reached their minimum, they are eligible to be released. They have a maximum, they still are serving that maximum term. So when they reach their minimum, they're eligible. It doesn't mean they're automatically released. They could be released on furlough, or they could be paroled by the parole board. So we used to have quite a few folks that reached their minimum, would be eligible for release, but due to lack of appropriate housing, were being held. Probably about, I would say it's a good 5 years ago. It was a little bit before COVID. COVID kind of skewed everything, but prior to COVID, it was pretty normal that we'd have about 150 folks held past their minimum that could be released, but for lack of housing. That number has decreased quite a bit. I don't know what the total number is. I know we've asked DOC, I think it's minimal, like 20 to 50 at the most for that.
And for furlough, are people furloughed easier if they have connections outside where like for jobs and whatnot? And I mean, I'm just trying to think of like, why else would you need Wi-Fi if you were, in order to contact the outside world? Would this facilitate people being able to, find a place? I mean, we have this stereotype of people landing someplace without a home, without a job. And it strikes me that Wi-Fi is so normal now that it's weird that it's not there, but just curious about like, what are the processes for folks to qualify for furlough?
That's a real question. That's an individualized issue per inmate and based on whether they've participated in programming while they're incarcerated, what their reentry plan is. When a person, there's a lot of layers to your question. So when someone's incarcerated, they could have access to the internet and total Wi-Fi like we do, but there are restrictions. And DOC places the restrictions on them, like for phone coverage or the contract with the telecommunications for their tablets and who they can email or who they can connect with for video. That's under a separate contract, but DOC limits who they have access to. They have an approved list of folks that particular inmate can access, because you don't want them to have access to the victims. You don't want them to have access to who knows what out there. So it's really limited in terms of what the person would have access to. In terms of trying and getting ready to be released, an inmate would be working with their case worker and the local PMP office that they would be, the community should relocate. They would work with their case supervisor for the reentry plan. And that case supervisor for that would be working with that local PMP office. And that's how they put together the reentry plan for folks who are getting close to reentry. And sometimes at the last minute that falls through. And sometimes the person who's incarcerated says, I've got housing, this person's willing to house me. And then the caseworker and PMP will reach out, and maybe that person is not so willing to house the person, but they don't feel comfortable to tell the inmate that they're not comfortable, so they let DOC make that decision. So there's a lot of layers to it.
I think
You gotta go to her.
Wayne, oh, does Sean?
I just
Introduce yourself.
Sean Sweeney, president of institutions, Haley said 50 to 7.
50 to 70, so it's edged up a little bit. But our population is edged up too, that's incarcerated.
So, but the primary driver for Wi-Fi has been staff, right?
A lot of it is staff. And a lot of it is to provide services to folks who are incarcerated, particularly the CCD. Because Community College of Vermont, to offer any courses, they have to physically go to the facility.
Not for the pleasure use of.
No,
Any projection from ADS about Wi-Fi? Just not ready to even.
I mean, this has been ongoing for a long time, and we've said enough. It's time to really bite the bullet and start doing this.
Thank you.
Right, and you have a huge spreadsheet, and we're not gonna go through all the spreadsheet, because you're gonna do that on the floor, but I would be interested in the State House things.
Let me just give you a little bit of how the money plays in, just so, I mean, you're the money committee. So we have 122.695 million bonded capacity.
Okay,
Within that, we had a bond premium for FY 27 of 6.8 million, 58, blah, blah, blah. So at least 6.8 million is within that 122 million bonding capacity. So we have that, that's for 2 years. So we've split that up.
13 total, plus the 2
Right, but this year was a bump.
this year was.
And then in terms of general fund, we have through the formula for the infrastructure cash fund, we have 17 million new dollars of general fund. On top of that, there's about 965,000, I'm just rounding things off because it's on the back of our spreadsheet, of interest that cash fund has earned. So that goes towards our general fund piece, as well as this is the first year that we've had, we call this reallocations, and I know 3 of you have been on Capitol Bill and the committee, so you know that what reallocations are. If you go to the last sheet of the spreadsheet,
back page there.
and you go down to section 18, and then subtotal cash fund sources, and you go in the gray column where you have that pale highlight.
Yep.
Those are general fund dollars that were appropriated and allocated to those particular projects from lines 191 down to 198. The law says if there's in the cash fund, if there's general fund dollars for a project that has hit a 3-year mark and it is not encumbered, it becomes reallocated. It is reallocated and stays in the fund. So we have in that section about $5.4 million of general fund that has been previously appropriated for capital bill projects that have hit that 3-year mark.
So you're talking about 191 to 198.
Yes.
And there was a stabilization facility?
That is DCF. That is the facility that we are currently working on. And that money was used for going out for an RFP and working with Virgins. And then they pulled that. And now they went out with another RFP. And they just received a bid back at the beginning of March. So BGS has started negotiating with that possible developer. They have not used any of this money yet. So it hit that 3-year mark. It is not encumbered because they haven't finalized any negotiations with the developer, so it's up to be reallocated. So
So we can't know where the location is yet because they're still negotiating.
we're negotiating, we don't know what the cost of the lease payments will be.
Yeah.
So if you look on the front sheet of the spreadsheet, you go to section 3, line 30,
Yeah.
there's 772,557 cash to go towards further design and development of that program. So that's to backfill some of that 300,000.
Okay.
Okay. So I can start you off real brief on what we did in section 2. If you look on the blue column is the bill as we passed it last year. The gray is the governor's proposed budget adjustment. So wherever you see the pale beige, that's what the governor has proposed. In the red block, where it is highlighted in yellow are the changes that we have made to the governor's recommend, and in some cases, changes we have made already that we already put in either FY 26 and 27 that the governor did not touch. We touched some of those. One of the big ones, I can bring you to the 3-acre parcel. Line 4 in conversations, not all the projects that they had hoped to would be going out in a timely manner. You have 5 years from the time you receive your permit to get the project done. There are 3 projects ready to go that come in at about 2.1 million. There's already about 5 million in the pot. So we figured that in the other projects, they haven't gotten their permits yet. So that's why that got cut back by 1.4 million, because not all projects are going to go forward in FY 27 or even FY 28. So that's why we went back into our current FY 26 and FY 27 budget, and we cut 1.4 million from that because they weren't going to get everything out the door within FY 27 or even FY 28, because a lot of them still need the permit. And then 120 State Street. We've been looking at this one. That is the DMV building across the street. There's a lot of steam line repairs and renovations that need to occur. There's a lot of moisture buildup. What's happening with 120 State Street is sort of on hold in a way, trying to figure out where the state and FEMA are going to come down with, I'm just going to use the word, with the rehab of sorts, with a capital complex.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what, where 120 State Street would fit in that within in terms of its HVAC system, and do we do a separate building for the whole complex or not? And if we do as a whole separate building for the whole complex for the HVAC system, is that going to incorporate 120 State Street, or is 120 State Street still going to be its own standalone building within that infrastructure? So we don't know what's going to happen yet, and they're still negotiating with FEMA. So we cut that back. State House entry upgrades. We've been working with BGS and with Sergeant at Arms.
that for this back spot?
Yeah, what it
here?
is where folks are entering single point of entrance, they finished the schematic design, they're going into more design documents to refine this. It is to do a whole new reentry on the west side. It's at the west side of the building where the single point of entry is. It's to reconfigure that so that you have an entry for the public, but also you have a separate entry for deliveries, particularly for the cafeteria or for items here, whatever we need to operate as a legislative branch. And then the courtyard will be filled in. That's the thinking. Courtyard will be filled in all the way to the arches here. And the main entrance into the building, once you come in that single point of entry, come down the corridor, main entrance will be the Lincoln hallway.
Oh, right by us.
Come in that way. Yeah, right.
How many years before that's gonna happen? If it's like anything
Well-
else, it'll be 15 years, so it doesn't.
It will be about a $22 million project.
It's a ways away. Okay.
So this will get us through a design document, so we know specifically what's happening. And possibly into construction documents, but it's going to be a 22 mil. They're saying 18 to 19. They haven't addressed parking. Because they're gonna lose parking by the pink lady. So you need to address truck entrance and deliveries. And you also need to address ADA parking, because we're gonna lose parking spaces. So that's why we put in that language.
So we don't need to go through the rest of this because I know you're gonna do that on the floor and this is not really our area, but I'm wondering if on the back sheet, there's anything like if the totals, we could just see the grand total pieces.
Well, the grand total is,
It's higher than
well,
125.
right, because you have the cash. You've got 122.695 plus for total bonded for 2 years.
Is that column P,
Yes,
line 204?
yes.
Okay.
And then for your cash, you have a total, and that's column S,
Yeah.
36.8 million, and that's for 2 years. What you got for FY '24 is 23.4.
Right, and that's what we went over that we put in the budget.
For FY '27,
Okay.
23.4. So the total capital bill, bonded and general funds, 159,550,000.
Okay. And is I know when I was in your committee 10 years ago, I think we were around 150 million maybe? I know we've been sort of slowly going
Well,
down.
we were there, we didn't have any cash, so it was all bonded.
Right,
So we were doing at least 75 million per year.
okay. About 140, 150 million a year.
Now we're down to about 50, 52.
So the totals haven't changed all that much. It's just that how it's being used. between
There's more
cash and
general
bonds.
funds. Back then, we didn't have general fund dollars.
Right,
We were totally 2-year budget,
right.
totally bonded.
Exactly.
And it started out at about 80 million a year, then it went to about 70. And then as we put in more general fund, they've gone down. So right now we are at about, I think it's 52 million, 53 million per year.
The CDAC recommendations for 50 mil
50
a
mil.
year, so 100 million across the plan,
Okay.
which is slightly reduced from last.
Right,
Yeah,
that's
that's
the previous was
Yeah.
52.
That does increase with bond premium.
Exactly.
Right. There are other places you can get it. I get that, yeah. Wayne, did you have a comment?
Different. We're building Sally Ports or Sally Port and St. Albans. Those Sally Ports ever get built?
Is that at the correctional facility? That's all connected to the booking and redoing the booking. And they are struggling and trying to figure out how to do the design work for that. They're working. There's a lot of issues with the booking area up in St. Albans. It's too small. And we put in money. I forgot how much money we put in 3 years ago for that, 4 years ago. We did that. We started putting money into it when we were on Zoom back in 21.
Then we have the other Sally Port issue where we have to keep the different types of people so that they couldn't interact.
Mhm.
That ever get done too?
No, they're all in design documents. It's all in design documents. So
Right, so
I don't
that's where we
know.
are.
I don't know if there's anything else on the spreadsheet that's raising any issues for folks, but
I think we really want to try to focus on what came to us, and that was what was in the budget, so I think we should be all set for that, yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions. So I think we have to vote it so we can get to the floor.
that's right.
Well, if you all want to wait around, any other questions from the committee? Not, I'd entertain a motion to approve H 952 as introduced. Tom Wayne.
Horse.
Any further discussion?
I just want to say,
Oh, yes,
I just want to say thank you.
yes.
It's hard, a lot of hard work. Thank you.
Committees, yep,
We did a lot of work. We did a lot of moving of the money.
I
yes,
bet you did.
yes,
Yeah.
and have to know all of the parts and pieces, so we appreciate that, we know about parts and pieces. They're different parts and pieces, but
We've
we've
been there.
Thank you. All right, if the clerk is ready, let's call the roll, please.
Representative Bowie,
Yes.
Representative Dickinson,
Yes.
Representative Feltes,
Yes.
Representative Consenza,
Yes.
Representative Roche,
Yes.
Representative Rowicky,
Yes.
Representative Nigro,
Yes.
we're all yes, Representative Steve.
Yes.
Representative Yakagoni,
Yes.
Representative Shy,
Yes.
nothing zero.
Wayne, did you do this one last year?
No, I don't think so. Well, maybe you did make me do this one.
Yes. You don't have to say much because it's already in the, why don't we give it to, if you don't mind, I'll give it to you, Wayne.
No problem.
Okay, that's great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all committee for your work. It'll be on the floor, I guess. What's today? Wait, Friday. Friday. Yeah. Everybody.
I'll send you.
Thank you. So committee, just remind you of our schedule.
No, you're just going.
Tomorrow is Thursday. We have anything for Emily tomorrow morning? All right. Okay, at the moment, Emily Burns coming in at 11 to talk about the operating statement. That's one of the last things she showed us with all of our spreadsheets before you push budget. Now we'll actually go over it so we can understand that. If we get something else before then, I will let you know, but at the moment, that's 11 o'clock tomorrow morning.
11.
So we're on at 11 unless you hear from me that we're on earlier. But that's where we are at the moment. Still working on a couple things, so. All right, let's go off live, please.